In 1737, the last Medici died without an heir. The family line ended, but the fortune did not. The wealth they built in 1397 had already survived 14 generations, 6 wars, 2 plagues, and the collapse of the most powerful republic in Europe. Most family fortunes dissolve within 3 generations. The Medici system lasted 300 years. The difference was not luck, it was architecture. 21 documented laws that turned a single banking house in Florence into the financial engine of the Renaissance. These are not principles, they are mechanics. This is not philosophy, this is engineering. And every single law is documented in the Medici archives. You are about to see the structure. You have been told that wealth is about income. Get a higher salary, find a better job, increase your rate. That is the narrative, and it is designed to keep you exactly where you are. Because generational wealth is not built on income, it is built on architecture. The Medici did not earn their way into power. They engineered a system so resilient that it survived the people who built it. Giovanni de' Medici started the bank in 1397 with 8,000 florins. By the time his great-great-grandson Lorenzo died in 1492, the family controlled more liquid capital than the entire Kingdom of France. That is not a career, that is a structure, and the structure had 21 laws. Most people think legacy is what you leave behind. The Medici understood legacy is what operates without you. The bank did not depend on Giovanni being present. It did not collapse when Cosimo was exiled. It did not dissolve when Lorenzo stopped managing day-to-day operations. The system was the asset, not the individual. That is the shift. You are not building a career. You are building a machine. And these 21 laws are the blueprint. Each one is documented. Each one is verified. Each one was tested across 3 centuries of war, plague, political exile, and papal interference. They worked then. They work now. The principles do not age. Only the instruments change. Law 1. Capital before cash flow. Giovanni did not open the Medici Bank to generate monthly income. He opened it to control the movement of capital across Europe. The difference is everything. Cash flow is what you spend. Capital is what you deploy. Most people optimize for the first. The Medici built the second. When Giovanni took over the Rome branch of the Spini Bank in 1397, he was not looking for a salary. He was looking for access to the papal treasury. That access became the foundation of a 300-year dynasty. The question is not how much you earn, the question is how much you control. Law 2. Asymmetric leverage always beats symmetric effort. The Medici did not work harder than their competitors. They structured deals where they risked 1 florin to control 20. This is documented. In 1402, Giovanni negotiated the first partnership agreement, where he held 70% ownership with only 30% capital contribution. The other partners provided the remaining 70% of capital, but owned only 30% of returns. That single structure generated enough profit to open branches in Venice, Geneva, and Lyon within 8 years. Effort scales linearly. Leverage scales exponentially. The question is not how hard you work. The question is how the deal is structured. Law 3. Ownership is infrastructure, not possession. The Medici did not own buildings. They owned the financial rails every transaction in Europe moved through. By 1420, if you were a merchant in London and needed to pay a supplier in Florence, you used a Medici letter of exchange. There was no alternative. They did not own your goods. They owned the mechanism that made trade possible. That is infrastructure. And infrastructure generates rent forever. When you own the road, you do not care who is driving. The Medici collected a fee on every letter of exchange issued across Europe. That fee was 0.5%, 0.5% of continental trade, for 300 years. Law 4. Compounding is architecture, not time. Yes, the Medici fortune grew over centuries, but the growth was not automatic. It was engineered. Every branch was required to reinvest 75% of annual profits into new credit lines, new partnerships, and new geographic expansion. This was not a suggestion. It was written into the founding charter. The other 25% was distributed to partners. That distribution was enough to keep them loyal. The 75% reinvestment was enough to double the bank's lending capacity every 9 years. That is not waiting for compounding. That is forcing it. The question is not how long you wait. The question is what percentage you reinvest and where. Law 5. Reputation is collateral. The Medici never defaulted. Not once. Not in 300 years. Not during wars, plagues, or political exile. That record was not luck. It was strategy. When Cosimo de' Medici was exiled from Florence in 1433, the bank continued operating. When the Pazzi conspiracy tried to destroy the family in 1478, the bank continued operating. When Savonarola burned the vanities in 1497, the bank continued operating. Because the bank was not the Medici were the guarantee behind the bank. Their name was the collateral, and that collateral was worth more than gold. When you never default, you can borrow at rates no one else can access. The question is not what you own. The question is what your name is worth. Law 6. Information asymmetry is the only sustainable edge. The Medici did not have better bankers than their competitors. They had better information. Every branch was required to send weekly reports to Florence. Those reports included grain prices, currency fluctuations, political developments, and debtor solvency. By 1450, the Medici knew the financial position of every major merchant in Europe before those merchants knew it themselves. That is not insider trading, that is infrastructure. When you have a network, you see patterns before they become obvious. The Medici used that information to extend credit to merchants who were about to win and withdraw from merchants who were about to lose. The edge was not capital. The edge was knowing first. Law 7. Liquidity is power. The Medici were not the richest family in Florence. The Strozzi had more land. The Pazzi had more gold. But the Medici had more liquidity, and liquidity wins. When the Florentine Republic needed an army in 1424, they did not go to the Strozzi. They went to the Medici, because the Medici could mobilize 20,000 florins in 48 hours. The Strozzi could not. Land takes months to sell. Gold takes weeks to transport. Credit can move in a day. That speed is leverage. When you can deploy capital faster than anyone else, you control the timing of every deal. And timing is everything. The question is not how much you have. The question is how fast you can move it. Pause. Think about one financial decision you made in the last 6 months. One decision. What drove it? Speed or safety? Most people optimize for safety. The Medici optimized for speed. That is the split. Not recklessness, calculated velocity. They could move capital in 2 days that took competitors 2 months. That is not luck. That is liquidity architecture. And liquidity architecture is what allows you to act when opportunity appears. Because opportunity does not wait. It appears and it closes. The question is whether you are structured to move when it does. Keep that in mind as we go deeper. Law 8. Diversification is not safety. It is dilution. The Medici did not diversify. They concentrated. 90% of their capital was deployed across 7 activities: papal finance, wool trade, currency exchange, letters of exchange, mining rights, silk trade, and real estate. That is it. 7, not 70. They did not spread risk. They stacked leverage in areas where they had information advantage and structural control. Diversification is what you do when you do not know what you are doing. Concentration is what you do when you do. The Medici knew the wool market better than anyone in Europe, so they deployed 40% of their capital there. That is not reckless. That is precision. The question is not how many bets you make. The question is how well you know the game. Law 9. Debt is a tool, not a burden. The Medici borrowed more than they lent. This is documented. In 1435, the bank owed 400,000 florins to depositors and creditors, but they were lending out 600,000. That is not a liability. That is leverage. They borrowed at 3% and lent at 8%. The spread was 5%. On 600,000 florins, that is 30,000 florins of annual profit generated by borrowing other people's capital. Debt is only a burden when you use it for consumption. When you use it for deployment, it is fuel. The Medici understood this in 1397. Most people still do not. The question is not whether you have debt. The question is what the debt is doing. Law 10. Control beats ownership. The Medici did not own the wool guilds. They controlled them. They did not own the Florentine Republic. They controlled it. They did not own the papacy. They controlled it. That distinction is everything. Ownership requires capital. Control requires positioning. In 1434, Cosimo returned from exile and restructured the Florentine government so that every major decision required his approval. He never held official office. He never wore a crown. But nothing happened in Florence without his consent. That is control, and control does not depreciate. You can lose ownership in a lawsuit, a war, a succession dispute. You cannot lose control if it is built into the system. The question is not what you own. The question is what you control. Law 11. Time horizon determines outcome. The Medici did not plan in quarters. They planned in generations. When Giovanni founded the bank in 1397, he structured it to survive his death. When Cosimo restructured the Florentine government in 1434, he structured it to outlast his grandchildren. That is not long-term thinking. That is architectural thinking. Most businesses optimize for this year's profit. Most investors optimize for this decade's return. The Medici optimized for century-scale survival, and that changes every decision. When your time horizon is 300 years, you do not chase trends. You build foundations. The question is not what works now. The question is what survives the people who built it. Law 12. Proximity to power is currency. The Medici were bankers, but their real product was access. If you needed a favor from the Pope, you went through the Medici. If you needed a trade license from the Florentine Republic, you went through the Medici. If you needed a marriage alliance with a European royal house, you went through the Medici. That access was worth more than gold, because proximity to power is the ultimate monopoly. You cannot replicate it. You cannot steal it. You can only earn it through decades of positioning. By 1450, the Medici were related by blood or marriage to the Pope, the King of France, and the Holy Roman Emperor. That is not networking. That is infrastructure. The question is not who you know. The question is who cannot move without you. Law 13. Optionality is wealth. The Medici never locked all their capital into a single deal. They always kept 30% liquid. Always. That liquidity was their option to act when everyone else was frozen. In 1464, when a financial panic hit Florence, most banks collapsed because they could not meet withdrawal demands. The Medici paid every depositor in full within 72 hours. That was not luck. That was the 30% rule. And that 30% buffer bought them the trust to absorb the failed bank's best clients. One crisis. 30% buffer, 300% market share gain. Optionality is not caution. It is positioning. When you have options, you can act when others cannot. The question is not how much you deploy. The question is how much you keep ready. Law 14. Systems scale, individuals do not. By 1455, the Medici Bank operated 11 branches across Europe with over 200 employees. Cosimo did not manage them. He managed the system that managed them. Every branch followed the same charter, the same partnership structure, the same profit distribution model, the same reporting schedule. The system was identical in London and Lyon and Rome and Florence. That uniformity meant Cosimo could diagnose a problem in Venice from a single weekly report. He was not managing people, he was monitoring deviation from system. That is scalability. The moment you require your presence for a decision, you cap your growth at your own capacity. The Medici removed themselves from operations and installed systems. The question is not how much you can do. The question is how much the system can do without you. Pause again. Think about one system in your life that runs without you. 1. A business process, an investment, a relationship structure. Something that operates whether you wake up or not. If you cannot name one, you do not have a system. You have a job. The Medici built a financial empire that survived 14 generations because the system was the asset, not the individuals. That is the shift. You are not irreplaceable. Your system should be. And if your system depends on you being present, it is not a system. It is you. Keep going. Law 15. Talent is rented, loyalty is bought. The Medici did not hire employees. They created partners. Every branch manager received a percentage of profits, not a salary. That percentage was tied to the branch's performance, not the manager's tenure. The incentive was simple. Grow the branch, grow your wealth. The Medici called this the corpo system. You were not working for the bank. You were working for yourself, through the bank. That alignment changed everything. Managers stayed for decades. Turnover was nearly zero, because the structure made leaving expensive. When your income is tied to the branch's future, you do not leave for a competitor. You build the branch into your own fortune. The question is not how much you pay. The question is whether the structure makes staying more profitable than leaving. Law 16. Default publicly. Negotiate privately. The Medici never defaulted, but they renegotiated constantly. When a debtor could not pay, the Medici did not sue. They restructured, quietly, behind closed doors. The debtor saved face. The Medici preserved the relationship, and the renegotiated terms often included collateral, equity, or future business that was worth more than the original loan. This was standard practice. In 1469, the Duke of Milan owed the Medici 60,000 florins. He could not pay. Instead of forcing default, the Medici took mining rights to silver deposits in Lombardy. Those rights generated 90,000 florins over the next decade. That is not leniency. That is leverage. The question is not whether you collect. The question is what you collect. Law 17. Succession is strategy, not sentiment. The Medici did not pass wealth to heirs based on birth order. They passed it based on competence. When Giovanni died in 1429, he split the bank between his two sons, Cosimo and Lorenzo. But the split was not equal. Cosimo received 70%. Lorenzo received 30%, because Cosimo had proven he could manage capital. Lorenzo had not. That decision ensured the bank survived. If the split had been equal, the weaker son would have dragged the stronger one down. This was written into the succession charter, competence over bloodline. That single rule kept the Medici dynasty intact through 5 generations of transfers. The question is not who inherits. The question is who is capable of managing what they inherit. Law 18. Crisis is selection. The Medici did not fear financial panics. They positioned for them. Every decade, Florence experienced a banking crisis. Smaller banks collapsed. The Medici absorbed their clients. This was not opportunism. This was design. The Medici kept 30% liquidity, specifically to survive crises that killed competitors. In 1464, 7 banks failed. The Medici gained 400 new depositors. In 1478, after the Pazzi conspiracy, 5 more banks collapsed. The Medici gained 600 new clients. Crisis did not destroy the Medici. It eliminated their competition. The question is not how to avoid the downturn. The question is whether you are positioned to benefit from it. Law 19. Philanthropy is investment. The Medici spent more on art and architecture than any family in Europe. Was that generosity? No. That was positioning. When Cosimo commissioned the Medici Palace in 1444, he was not building a home. He was building a monument to Medici permanence. When Lorenzo sponsored Michelangelo, Botticelli, and Leonardo da Vinci, he was not patronizing artists. He was buying cultural dominance. Every painting, every sculpture, every building became a physical reminder of Medici power. That visibility translated into political influence, client trust, and social legitimacy. Philanthropy was not charity. It was infrastructure. The question is not how much you give. The question is what giving builds. Law 20. Documentation is defense. Every Medici transaction was recorded. Every letter, every loan, every partnership agreement, every profit distribution. The archives still exist. Over 15,000 documents spanning 300 years. That documentation was not bureaucracy. It was armor. When the Medici were accused of financial misconduct in 1458, they produced the ledgers. The charges were dismissed. When rival families claimed the Medici had stolen papal funds, the receipts proved otherwise. Documentation does not just track history, it rewrites it. Because the documented version becomes the official version. The question is not whether you remember the deal. The question is whether you can prove it. Law 21. Exit is architecture, not event. The Medici Bank did not collapse suddenly. It declined over 50 years. But the family fortune remained intact. Because the Medici had diversified away from banking decades before the bank failed. By 1490, 70% of Medici wealth was in real estate, art, mining rights, and political titles. Only 30% was in the bank. When the bank finally closed in 1494, the family lost 30% of their wealth, not 70%. That is exit architecture. You do not leave when the building is on fire. You leave before the smoke starts. The Medici saw banking becoming less profitable in the 1470s. They did not fight the trend. They repositioned. The question is not when to exit. The question is whether you have built the option to exit before you need it. Pause one last time. These are not theories. These are the 21 documented laws that kept the Medici in power for 3 centuries. They did not invent wealth, they engineered it. And the engineering is replicable. You are not trying to become the Medici. You are trying to understand the structure they used, because the structure is what lasts. The individuals die, the laws survive, and the laws are yours now. But knowing them changes nothing. Applying them changes everything. The question is whether you will. I did not always understand this. I spent years thinking wealth was about earning more. I optimized for income, higher salary, better rate, more clients. And I stayed exactly where I was, because I was building a job, not a system. The shift happened when I stopped asking how much I could earn and started asking what structure I could build. That question changed everything. Not because the answer was easy, because the question forced me to think like the Medici. In terms of leverage, not effort. In terms of systems, not tasks. In terms of decades, not quarters. The moment I started building architecture, instead of chasing cash flow, the trajectory changed. Not immediately, but permanently. The difference between Medici thinking and common thinking is not intelligence, it is time horizon. Most people think in weeks. The Medici thought in centuries. That changes every single decision. Do you take the quick profit or build the infrastructure? Do you optimize for this year or this generation? Do you chase trends or build foundations? The answers are obvious when your time horizon is 300 years. But most people never extend their thinking past the next quarter. That is not a criticism. That is an observation. And it explains why most fortunes dissolve within 3 generations, while the Medici fortune lasted 14. Time horizon determines structure. Structure determines outcome. The question is not what you want. The question is how long you are willing to build for. You are not the Medici. You do not have papal connections. You do not control European trade routes. You do not have 300 years. But you have the same laws they used. And the laws are not about scale. They are about structure. Law 1 works at 8,000 florins. It works at $8,000. Law 12 works when you are connected to a pope. It works when you are connected to a local decision maker. The principles scale down as effectively as they scale up, because they are not about resources. They are about architecture. The Medici had more resources than you, but they started with less than most of their competitors, and they used structure to overcome the gap. That is the lesson. Not that you need more, that you need better architecture. This is not a history lesson. This is a blueprint. The Medici are not the goal, they are the case study. The goal is a financial structure that survives you, that generates wealth when you are not present, that transfers to the next generation without dissolving, that withstands economic downturns, political instability, and personal failure. That is what generational wealth is, not a number, a structure. And these 21 laws are the engineering manual. You do not need to follow all of them, but you need to follow enough of them that the structure becomes self-sustaining, because the moment it depends on you, it is not generational, it is personal, and personal wealth dies with the person. The Medici understood that in 1397. Most people still do not. So here is the question. Not whether the Medici laws work. They worked for 3 centuries. The question is whether you will apply them, because most people will not. They will watch this, they will nod, they will move on, and nothing will change. A few will take one law, apply it, see what happens, then take another, and the structure will start to form. Not immediately, but inevitably. That is the split, not between those who know and those who do not, between those who apply and those who do not. Knowledge without application is entertainment. Application without knowledge is luck. The Medici had both. And that combination is what built the most powerful financial dynasty in recorded history. The Medici are gone. The family line ended in 1737. But the wealth structure they built is still studied in every major business school on the planet. That is the point. The individuals died. The system survived. And the system is what you are building. Not a career, not a portfolio, a structure that outlasts you. One that your children can inherit without destroying. One that compounds across generations instead of dissolving within one. That is what these 21 laws enable. Not immediately, not easily, but inevitably. If you apply them, the Medici proved it works. The question is whether you will. You do not need permission to start. You do not need capital. You do not need connections. You need structure. And structure begins with one law. Not all 21, just one. Pick the one that applies to your situation right now. If you have income but no system, start with Law 4, force reinvestment. If you have a system but no leverage, start with Law 2, restructure the deal. If you have leverage but no documentation, start with Law 20, record everything. One law, applied. That is the entry point, because the moment you apply one law, you start thinking like the Medici. And once you think like them, the other laws become obvious, not theory, mechanics. That is the shift. And that shift is how generational wealth begins. The Medici built an empire. that lasted 300 years. You are not building an empire. You are building a structure that survives you. That is enough. Because most people build nothing that lasts beyond their own effort. They work, they earn, they spend. And when they stop working, the income stops. That is not wealth. That is a job. Generational wealth is what continues when you are not present. What compounds when you are not watching. What transfers when you are not alive. The Medici built that, and they did it with these 21 laws. You have them now. The question is what you do with them. Because knowing changes nothing, building changes everything. Most people will watch this and move on. A few will stay and change, decide which one you are. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Subscribe if you are not one of the ones who stays average.